I'm Lauren Mayk. Welcome to Battleground Politics. I'm talking today to a congresswoman who has, along with some of her colleagues, been at the center of a controversy stemming from a video addressing members of the military and urging them to refuse unlawful orders. Well, President Trump labeled it seditious behavior punishable by death. He later said he was not threatening death, but said he thinks they're in serious trouble. Well, Congresswoman Chrissy Houlahan represents the Chester County area. I talked to her about the reaction to that and how it's impacted her office. We also talked about the recent strikes on suspected Venezuelan drug boats and whether lawmakers can make a deal to address health insurance costs. Congresswoman Chrissy Houlahan joins me now. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Congresswoman, there is a lot to talk to you about with what is happening on Capitol Hill, and you sit on the Armed Services Committee, which is dealing with issues related to strikes on a suspected Venezuelan drug boat. I want to talk to you about all those things, but I want to start with your safety and that of your staff, because you and I have not spoken since your office reported getting a bomb threat to your Westchester office. Have there been any other incidents or threats since then?
I think that our posture right now is to remain attentive. We certainly do continue to get calls that are worrisome and threats, and we do have protection. But I will also say that we get an enormous amount of calls still that are enormously positive and are thoughtful. And it does give you a lot of hope and faith in the American people that many people are spending time reaching out to say thank you. And so for that, I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I saw that you posted some of those on social media as well. Have these threats, has the communication changed how you go about your daily business and do your job?
No, it is a very short answer to that. I grew up in a military family. I grew up in a service with a service mindset, and I know that this job comes with its risks. And I know that it's a very, very important job. And so even though it is a really scary and unfortunate thing to feel as though your office and the folks who work with and for you are threatened and you and your family are threatened, and that's a terrible time that we live in, that is the case. It makes me even more clear-eyed and more resolved, makes me even more confident that what I'm doing is important and worthy of conversation. And so, no, I haven't changed my mindset on this.
We learned recently that the FBI wanted to interview you and your colleagues. Have you spoken with the FBI at this point?
Have not spoken directly with the FBI at this point, no.
Do you plan to?
I don't know how this will all unfold. I think it's stunning. Frankly, it's kind of staggering that 6 of us who put out a video that literally restated law, that said that if you are in uniform, you do not have to obey an unlawful order, would result in this kind of controversy and this sort of conversation. And the President of the United States threatening the group of us for treason and sedition and asking for our hanging. That's pretty stunning. And that it has evolved at this point into a possible FBI investigation says more about the president and his administration than it does about me, I believe.
And, I know you said it didn't change the way you do your. Does it make you nervous? Are you nervous about your safety and your staff's safety?
I have always kind of moved through the world in my various parts of my career, whether in the military or in education or in business or now here in service in Washington, knowing that there are risks and rewards to all the things that we do. And so I think that my husband says that I am sort of preternaturally calm in these sorts of in situations and environments, but I'm confident that I'm doing the right thing and I'm in the right place.
We are having a lot of conversations now about actions by the military, but the video that you referred to that you and your colleagues put together came together before some of these conversations started to surface. How did that video come together? How did it start?
Sure. A group of us, as I mentioned, 6, got together and talked about doing a video like this. But it wasn't, to your point, about any one incident or any one occurrence that worried or alarmed us. It was rather sort of a buildup of sorts. And it started back in the beginning of the administration when the military was doing things like removing the JAG, and the JAG is the core of people who are the lawyers for the military, who give the advice on things like strikes on ships. And they were also firing or removing the IGs, the inspectors general, the people who are responsible for whistleblowers or for things that are, going wrong or sideways, and investigating them in one way, shape, or form. And then there were kind of a series of events, whether domestic or international, that just were worrisome. Truly, Signalgate, another example. And so, as a consequence, we did this video, to remind men and women in uniform that we had their backs, that we had their experience, and that we wanted to make sure that they knew that it was indeed not just okay, but required of them not to follow any order that was unlawful.
Were you expecting the response that you got from the president and the White House?
Certainly not. I mean, in a million years, would you ever expect that the leader of the free world, the president of the United States, the commander in chief, would order the hanging of 6 duly elected members of Congress for stating a law? That was not on my bingo card, as they say. It was definitely not something that I expected.
Well, let's talk about the Venezuelan boat strikes that have recently been in the news, in particular a second strike on a boat alleged to be carrying drugs when there were reportedly survivors from the first strike. Do you consider that action, that second strike, to be lawful?
Well, I think what I've determined over the last several weeks, as we've talked about this, or couple weeks, and even today, as the Admiral and the Joint Chiefs of Staff have been in and talking to Congress in one side of the House or the other, is that we have so much that we need to learn and understand to really understand what happened that day over those hours, and it was hours and hours. And I think that the Congress, I'm grateful for finally seeing some amount of oversight, initiative, and movement. The Congress has that responsibility and obligation to ask all of those kinds of questions and to bring people in and get the answers. But on its surface, ostensibly, it sure looks like what would be defined as a war crime at its best. If you accept as fact that this is a war. Many people, myself included, do not believe that this is an actual war, that this is actually would be an extrajudicial killing or a murder, because there is not a valid war that Congress has approved of or that Congress has agreed to. And so, yes, I believe we still have so much more information to understand and to learn. But based on what I'm hearing about today's conversations, I'm even more concerned than I was yesterday.
Do you think that the video of these strikes, in particular of the second strike, do you believe the video of the second strike should be released?
I do. I very much believe that the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees, of which I am part of both, should absolutely see those videos, all of us, not just the chairman and the ranking member, which are the two heads of each of those committees. And I also very much believe that it is appropriate that the American people have the ability to understand this too, because from my understanding of what these videos portray, it is something that the American people deserve to understand. And I'm really kind of thankful that the conversation about the Code of Justice and international war law, all of those kinds of things, because of the video, has sort of primed the American public to understand what they're looking at and why it matters. And if for a minute I could kind of put everybody in America into a place where we're thinking about, if this were a vessel, a scrap of a vessel, part of a shipwreck that had American sailors clinging to its wreckage, would we expect or allow or tolerate the bombing of those sailors clinging to the wreckage? No, that would be beyond the pale. It would be something that we would not tolerate in the way that we anticipate that war should unfold, if you assume that this is a war. And so in any way that you think about it, this is an unacceptable, dishonorable way of behaving on the open sea.
As you mentioned, the admiral involved in that, Frank Bradley, has been on Capitol Hill today, just hours before this interview. I know he talked to the leadership of the committee that you sit on. If you got a chance to talk to him, what do you want to know from him?
I want to see the video and the audio. I want to see the video and the audio from what's within the room itself during those hours of the conversation and the strike itself. I want the documentation, the orders themselves, to make sure that I understand what he was following and who within his chain of command was following what. I want so much. I want to know what sort of weapons were used and why. I want a lot of information. And I don't have enough at this point in time. And I think, again, going back to what my job is here on behalf of people back home, my job is oversight, amongst other things. My job is to sit in those rooms on behalf of all of us and to listen to the evidence, to oversee our executive branch and our military as a consequence. And I hope that we have the opportunity to do that.
I want to ask you about something else as well. There's been an Inspector General report regarding Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's sharing of military information on a group Signal chat. And NBC News is reporting that that report says that he violated military regulations by using his personal phone for official business, and that information shared had been marked secret and could have imperiled U.S. troops, according to people who have read the report. Now, according to NBC, it does say that Hegseth has the authority to declassify information. And the secretary himself posted on X, no classified information, total exoneration, case closed. Have you seen the report, and what is your takeaway?
I have seen both the classified and the unclassified version of the report. For those who Google the unclassified version of the report, I would direct them to page 25. Page 25 has a paragraph that I think is pretty damning on it, which talks about exactly what you're saying, which is he used his personal device with an application that's not authorized for use of transmitting any sort of material or communication within the DoD to transmit information that was 100% secret information. And yes, he has the authority to declassify information, but in my opinion, that authority does not extend retroactively, which seems to be how he's been justifying this. Any person below him, including me when I was a junior officer, would have absolutely been fired or court-martialed or resigned for sharing that kind of information in that way. And so in no way do I believe that this report exonerates him. And I believe that it is another example of his the fact that he's an absolute liability for the administration, for the DoD, the Department of Defense, for our national security, and for the security of the world. And I think we really collectively could do a lot better. We could be a lot better off if Secretary Hegseth were no longer part of our conversation or part of the Department of Defense.
What do you think the next step should be in that regarding that report and that situation?
So, I hope that all of this, the report, the strike on the Venezuelan craft, all of these kinds of conversations, just his overall lack of military bearing and the way that he approaches and disrespects the military and the law of the laws of war. I hope all of those things at some point get to the place where President Trump recognizes that he is not the right person for this position. We really deserve better. The American people and the American men and women in uniform deserve better. And so I'm hoping that that's where that will evolve.
Before we run out of time, I do want to ask you about something domestically. The deadline is coming up for people to sign up for Obamacare coverage for next year. It is something that was discussed a lot during the government shutdown, but there has since been no deal on extending subsidies. Do you see a path to getting anything done to extend those subsidies or do something else to lower costs before that deadline on, I believe, December 15th?
Sure. And this is why it was so important and why people like me were so dug in during the shutdown, that this was a really important issue. The cost of healthcare was set and will go up significantly for a large number, tens of millions of people, if something isn't done in Congress soon. And it appears, to your point, that nothing will be done, whether it's an extension of the Affordable Care Act, which is what we were advocating for, or something new, a different proposal. The Republican majority has put nothing forward, and we're within days of this deadline. Miracles can happen. There's something called a discharge petition. It's a process where if enough of us sign on to something that it forces a vote in the House, we as Democrats have put that discharge petition forward and in process. And if 218 people sign on to that, we will force a vote to extend the Affordable Care Act by 3 years. But that very, very rarely happens, and it requires 4 or 5 of our Republican colleagues to cross the aisle, to across their party, and to vote with us. And so that could happen, and I sure hope so, because this is just the tip of the iceberg in the affordability of the American people. Healthcare is a really important part of their budget, and an important part of our lives, but it is also just part and parcel of all of the things that are costing us money in our homes right now that we all need to be focused on. Affordability, of course.
Would you be okay with some changes to the way those subsidies operate in terms of income limitations, that
Absolutely.
type of thing?
Absolutely. Those who know me and who have followed my track record here know that I'm one of the most bipartisan members of Congress, and I am part of groups that work across the aisle regularly and work to try to find those compromises and to understand that we need to work together. But this administration, this Congress particularly, has been completely unwilling to work across the aisle or within caucuses or different groups. And as a consequence, we find ourselves where we are now, where the American people will literally be paying for the fact that we can't work together.
And you mentioned the discharge petition, and we have actually seen a few of those recently. The most high profile, of course, being with the Epstein files, but we also we are seeing one right now with a stock buying piece of legislation as well. Do you see this as a change in the way Congress operates in any way, that we should expect maybe more of that kind of action from rank and file members?
Maybe. That being said, we've seen a couple of discharge petitions this Congress, meaning in the last, 10 or 11 months, also fail. Even if they've gotten the right number of votes, the Speaker of the House has been able to block them. And so, yes, this is a tool, but it's usually a tool of the minority and very rarely a tool that the majority uses. To your point, the majority is the group that put together the one on stock trading. And so maybe there's a change in the methodology ongoing here. But wouldn't it really be nice if Democrats and Republicans could work together and committees could work the way that they were designed with regular order, and we could introduce legislation that was meaningful, have the budget done on time? Those are all the things that we could do if we didn't continue to, throw shots across each other's bow up and be partisan in the way that we conduct ourselves on the floor and in our country.
If Democrats controlled the House, which they could, if they win in the midterms, would you feel comfortable bringing a discharge petition yourself?
Against my party, do you mean?
Yeah.
I think that you have to always think about, do you have the number that you would need? Do you think there's 218 people out there who agree with you? And I sure, if I felt as though there was something like that, I would absolutely be able and willing to do that. But that's a pretty big number. And so you have to be, thoughtful on how you use your leverage. And there's all different other kinds of ways to use your leverage. And like I said, probably the best way would be if our committees themselves were working. And this actually kind of loops back into the oversight responsibility. Our committees right now, for the last 9 or 10 months, have been absolutely idle. We've done almost nothing. And that should be very worrisome to the American people, not just legislatively, but also in our responsibilities for oversight and hearings. I'm on the Intelligence Committee, and we still have not had a briefing, not one briefing, on the intelligence that we have had or theoretically have had to provide the strike information for those 80 or so people who've been killed on the high seas. We really need that. And my leadership, the leadership of the Intelligence Committee, the Republican leadership of the Intelligence Committee should be demanding that. But because of the shutdown and because of the unwillingness of the Congress to do its job, instead of letting the executive branch, the president's branch, do our job, we have been, relatively speaking, idle. And that should really worry everyone.
All right, we'll have to leave the conversation there for now. Congresswoman Chrissy Houlahan, thanks so much for joining us. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
On the day I spoke to Congresswoman Houlahan, committee leadership on Capitol Hill was briefed on those Venezuelan boat strikes. The reaction was mixed. Here's the response from a House Democrat and Senate Republican.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have two individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States.
No, I didn't see anything disturbing about it. I saw 2 survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs down for the United States, back over so they could stay in the fight.
A defense official told NBC News the admiral saw the 2 survivors as legitimate military targets based on the rules for the operation. I reached out to the Pentagon and the White House about the Congresswoman's comments about Secretary Hegseth. The Pentagon said they had nothing to provide. We did not hear back from the White House as of this episode's posting. That does it for this edition of Battleground Politics. To watch or listen to previous episodes, you can go to the NBC 10 app or our NBC Philadelphia YouTube channel, or you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.